Hello everyone watching from at home and those of you tuning on Facebook Live. My name is Chef Andy and welcome yet again to another episode of Lunch Guide. On this particular episode, just like the one before, we're going to be focusing on some very beautiful dishes that you can actually incorporate as snacks, as side meals, and as appetizers for you and your family at home. On this particular episode, I'm going to be focusing on chicken lollipop and rice balls. For those, I'm going to be using the ingredients to my right, which we'll introduce. From the front, I've got one piece there of chicken wing, which I'll be able to show you how that is turned into a lollipop. I've also got some breadcrumbs there. I've also got some pre-done chicken lollipops here. I've also got one white onion, some mixed herbs there, some curry powder, some teriyaki sauce, and some oyster sauce. I'm also going to be using one regular organic egg and one carrot, about one lemon, about 2 tablespoons of mango chutney. This you can either make from scratch or you can be able to find that in your regular retail stores. We're also going to be incorporating some garlic, some chives, some fresh coriander, some lettuce just to serve, and last but not least, some rice, some pre-cooked rice, which we're going to be turning into balls. And I'm also going to use some salt and pepper just to taste. So this is your chance to now grab your pens and papers if you're going to be taking notes, and when we come back, we are going to have some fun. See you after the short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who missed out on the introduction, I was introducing the dishes of the day, which is the chicken lollipop and the rice balls. We are going to kick off the show with the chicken lollipop, and for that I've got a nice beautiful piece of chicken wing there. So very important that you also you get to know that it is actually very handy to actually do your chicken lollipops in advance. If it takes you quite a bit of time, they can actually be done a day in advance. You can leave them overnight in the fridge and they should actually be ready to cook on the very following day. But for this particular reason, I'm going to be showing you how to make it from scratch. So these have actually been pre-done just before we began the show. I'm sure you'll be able to get quite a bit of time to practice on your own at home. So just to start off, we're going to need a very sharp knife and of course one piece of chicken wing. And always begin by taking the feather part off completely. Then proceed also to cut your wing right through the center. You should actually be able to find that using your knife. There should actually be a nice little opening between the two joints, and that should actually allow for your knife to just slice through very easily. And as you can see, it gives you a nice clean cut, and it's exactly what you're looking for. Some of you may actually assume or actually believe that it is easier to chop with the knife. I always believe it is actually easier to let the knife do the work for you, and it is as easy as that. So next up, we're going to proceed to turn this into the lollipops, and it's very, very easy. I'm going to take the most inner part, which is the one closest to the wing, to the breast rather, and all you're going to do is, with looking at your piece of wing, you should actually have the nice bit of chunk that is right at the top, and you've also got the very narrow side at the bottom. All you're going to do now is turn that around, and using your sharp knife, make a small cut as you go around the edge. Once that's done, using your hands, just begin to literally strip the meat from the bone while pulling it down towards the end, but not completely. So basically that should be able to turn over very simply. Of course, having your skin on the inside and the flesh on the outside. And as you can see, it gives you a very, very beautiful lollipop. And now for the second piece, this one actually comes with 2 bones. So what you're going to do is, as we did with the first, check for the sides. You should be able to see one particular side that has the bone completely exposed, and it's normally the side with the flesh at the top. And all you're going to do is, using your knife, put your knife right through the 2 bones and push your knife right through. And that should allow you to actually break that apart. And all you're going to do now, just like you did with the first piece, you're going to put your finger right through the bones and slide right through the center as I'm doing. Once you do that, grab the smaller piece, the smaller bone, and proceed to twist it sideways, and that should be able to detach itself with a little bit of a pull. And as you can see, the bone comes out nice and clean, and you're going to do the same thing as before. So begin from the narrow end, working your fingers along the bone, stripping the meat from the bone with the edge of your nail. Just cut that. And once more, just proceed to pull the meat down, making sure the skin is on the inside and the flesh is on the out. And as you can see, that gives you a very beautiful piece as well. Now for the other pieces, you can actually decide to also freeze this, and you can actually boil them later. The trimmings or the leftovers can actually be used for making some chicken stock. So this I wouldn't recommend for you to chuck immediately. You can make a bit of stock, you can refrigerate that or freeze it, and you can be able to use it in the future. So for now, we are going to discard the two, and we're just going to add the two pieces back to our bowl. All right, now next up, we're going to proceed to marinate our wings. And very, very simply, for that you will need a nice big mixing bowl. To that, we're going to be adding our curry powder and our mixed herbs. I'm also going to add to that a small dash of salt, about half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. And of course, very importantly, some freshly ground black peppercorns. I'm also going to be improvising with a bit of garlic, so grab about 4 to 5 cloves. So this is already peeled garlic. All you're going to do is just using the side of your knife, smash them flat against your board, reconstitute them to the center, and proceed to chop very, very gently. And now for those of you who already own a pestle and mortar like the one I'm holding, you can actually just throw your garlic in there and pound it. It will not make much of a difference. So for the garlic, just proceed to chop that a little fine. Making sure to chop it as finely as you possibly can. And proceed to add your garlic into the mixing bowl with the herbs. Now this will actually form as a very dry rub. A dry rub is very similar to a marination, except for the fact that you will actually use everything else but any liquid. Liquid being anything related to vinegar, any pre-made sauces, or any particular oils. So this is going to be quite a very, very dry rub. So we're going to add our chicken into the same bowl. And we're going to add about 1.5 tablespoons of some breadcrumbs. And using a pair of tongs or a spoon, proceed to toss everything in the bowl together, making sure to fold from the bottom up. Of course, allowing your herbs and your garlic to coat your chicken completely. Remember, you can also do this process beforehand and leave them to marinate overnight in your refrigerator. Or if you're going to be doing them on the same day, anywhere between an hour to 2 should actually be a very good amount of time to allow your flavors to marinate. So proceed to mix everything together. Right, once that's done, you can actually set that aside, give it a few minutes to marinate, and while that continues, we'll proceed to heat our pan with oil. And we're just going to give that a few minutes to come to the boil. But while that continues, we are also going to be making some rice balls, as I mentioned, so very, very handy. Always just turn over your board. It will actually make it a little easier for you to continue working. and it will actually limit any chances of you actually contaminating any of your dishes with the chicken. Also, very importantly to remember, you can actually use the same knife when you're cutting meat. Just always remember to clean it before cutting two different substances or food ingredients of the same kind. So very simply, we're going to start by chopping up our carrot. And for that, I'm going to begin by, first of all, trimming just a bit of the side there. Turn that over to the board and continue to do the same, going around, turning once. Proceed to cut them into some half-inch size chunks. Now proceed to julienne them. Julienne would be a very, very thin strip. And for those of you who may actually be in possession of a food processor, you can actually also throw them in there. The idea is to just get them to much smaller sizes. As I mentioned, we are going to be folding them into some balls, so very crucial that you have them almost to a size that will be closer in size to the rice. So once those are julienne, just turn them sideways and proceed to chop as finely as you possibly can. So for this particular recipe, I'm going to be using about half a large carrot to 1 cup of cooked rice. Right, so once that's done, proceed to grab another bowl, and to that, begin by adding in your carrots. Next up, your bowl of rice. So this is pre-cooked rice that I made a little earlier in the show, and this is basically just regular basmati rice. So it's quite a bit dry, and that's basically the consistency you're looking for. So you may actually want to weigh out or measure out your 2 cups of water and probably pour out just about a quarter of it, and that should be able to cook your rice into a nice, beautiful, dry, more of a crummy consistency. So proceed to add your rice into the bowl with the carrots. I'm gonna add just a little bit. Right, once that's done, we're going to proceed to add a little bit of our soy sauce. Very importantly also to remember that soy sauce does tend to give your food quite a bit of a saltiness to it. So I will remind you at this stage, if you are going to be improvising with soy sauce, you may actually want to cut down quite a little bit on the salt to make sure that your food is not over salted. Next up, we're going to crush some black peppercorns to our mixture. And to that, I will also be adding some chives. So we're going to chop up about a handful of chives. I'm using fresh chives for this recipe, but if you're not able to find this in your regular retail stores, you can actually substitute it for leeks or even spring onions. The idea is to really just give it that beautiful color and also to give it a bit of an uplift with the flavor. So just proceed to chop your chives very, very finely. Now, for those of you who may not know what chives are, chive is actually quite very similar to onion. It does come from the same family, and you can actually be able to find this in your regular retail stores or your regular market. Now proceed to mix everything together in your bowl. Making sure to give your bowl a turn as you proceed. That will actually allow you to get a nice, even, consistent mix. And you can actually also give that just a few minutes on the side. Always give your food just a few minutes for the flavors to actually marinate really well. So we're going to set that aside, and I'll bring your attention back to the chicken we had actually cleaned out a little earlier. If you're just tuning in, we're going to be doing some chicken lollipops and some rice balls, as I mentioned. So we're going to begin our first process of cooking by just shallow frying this in some oil. Of course, adding one piece at a time. And now also very handy to have while you're frying anything, always have a container on the side with some parchment paper. That will allow you to actually drain your chicken once it's fully cooked. So I'm going to use a separate tongs to give those a mix in the oil. And remember, at this point you're actually just doing the fast cooking, so basically this is just to give it a bit of color. Now also to give you just a bit of history of chicken lollipop, it's a very much an oriental kind of dish, very common among the Indian community. You can actually be able to sample some of the most beautiful chicken wings within Nairobi. I won't go into details as to where to find them, but I do know some of you may actually have had a chance to try some. I hope you're now going to actually have some motivation to do it on your own, and you can actually also teach this to your kids. They may actually also have a bit of fun, and it actually, as I mentioned, is a very good substitute for a light lunch, a snack, or even an appetizer just before the main meals. So now for the wings, you're going to be, remember this is very lean meat, it's white meat, so you're going to be frying those for anywhere between 5 to 6 minutes until they're nicely, beautifully crisp, golden brown. Right, now once you've achieved that nice, beautiful golden color, if you can be able to see that from the cameras, once you get that nice, beautiful blonde color, proceed to remove them from the oil. Of course, always remembering to give it a shake. And once those are out, proceed to do the same for the rest, adding, of course, one piece at a time. And it's also very handy to actually also keep a tab on this using a stopwatch or a clock, just to make sure that you've actually managed to cook it right through to the center. But remember, having turned the meat off the bone, it should actually be able to cook a little faster, giving your bones a nice, beautiful, crisp look to them. Right, so that once that is done, we're going to allow that to continue cooking for another few minutes. But while that continues, I am going to be using some of the condiments we had on the side, which I'm going to be using to plate. But before we get to that part, we will go into a very, very brief short commercial break. And when we do come back, I'm going to show you the very simple technique of finishing off the wings. I'm also going to be showing you what to do with the rice balls. We're also going to incorporate some of the egg that we have, a bit of that white onion, and a bit of lemon juice to serve. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Hello ladies and gentlemen, once more and welcome back. We did take a very short break, and before that I was basically finishing off our beautiful chicken wings there. As you can see, it's a nice beautiful golden crisp color, and they're actually nice and crunchy. You can actually hear it from the rattle of the basket. And now we're going to go into the next and final stage where we are going to plate some of our dishes. But before I get there, we do have something that we are going to be doing now, which is the rice balls. So as you can see, I've got a pan with a shallow pan of oil there. Just going to give that a few seconds to heat up. And while that continues, I'm going to proceed to finish off our rice mixture as I mentioned earlier. So begin by giving it another thorough mix. Remember, this took a rest for about 10 to 15 minutes just to really let the rice absorb the soy sauce and all the spices we added. And now we are going to add one whole egg. So just crack one egg in there and proceed to give that a mix. And at this stage, you should actually have quite a wet mixture in your bowl. And that is actually quite a good thing. A bit of moisture in the rice mixture will actually allow the oil to penetrate really quickly. It will allow also for the rice bowl to actually dehydrate very, very well once it's perfectly cooked. And you're actually going to see that in a little bit. So once that is mixed, proceed to grab a spoon of choice, or if you do have an ice cream scoop like myself, this will also come in handy. I like to use a water bath for this because it will actually allow for the rice to come out of the scoop really, really easily. So we're just going to begin by grabbing a plate. And very easily we're going to start by scooping our rice balls into the plate, into the oil. Of course, always making sure to completely fill your scoop. Press it against the side and move it sideways a few times. And that should be able to allow for you to get a nice, very consistent mix. And from there, we're just going to dump that into the oil very gently. And proceed to do the same for about another 2 or 3 pieces. Very important to actually press your mixture onto the side of your bowl. This does allow for you to get rid of any spaces or air pockets. And proceed to do the same for the other. Now we're going to add one last final piece. Right to the side. And now proceed to allow for the fast cooking, anywhere between 4 to 5 minutes. Using a spoon, you can actually be able to do this if you have the time. Just scoop a bit of the oil from the sides and pour that right over the rice bowl. That will actually help for keeping the bowl really consistent and allow for it to really turn over easily once cooked on the first side. So just gently using as a ladle or any big spoon that you may have, just proceed to just baste those with a bit of the oil. And you'll actually start to notice that around the sides, it will actually start to turn a little golden. Of course, as you pour the oil on top, you will actually notice a bit of coloring as well. So we are going to allow those just a few minutes to continue cooking before we give them a turn. But before we do so, we're going into the last process now of finishing our plating. I'm just going to grab our plates. And now we're going to finish off our chicken. So very, very simply, begin by first taking out your parchment paper and pour your wings into a bowl. And next up, proceed by adding your oyster sauce. And also squeeze in just half a lemon juice, half a lemon, sorry, using a strainer to just hold that pulp and the seeds. And now all you need to do is just grab your bowl from the side, give it a bit of a juggle just to get that oyster sauce to coat your chicken. And now you can proceed to move those onto a plate, and those are good to serve as they are. So it's actually a nice, beautiful addition when you use a bit of soy sauce. It does have that beautiful sweetness to it. You can actually break the sweetness by using a bit of acid. You could use either a bit of olive oil. You could actually also add just a little bit of vinegar, and that should be able to cut the sweetness quite a little bit. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my version of our chicken lollipop. Now, just to bring you back to the pan, we're going to proceed to turn those over. So always begin with the piece that went in first. Just move it towards the side of your pan and just give it a turn. And do the same thing for the rest. Careful as well, the oil could actually pop quite a few times. So very, very handy to actually take precaution when working with oil. Right, now we're just going to allow for those to continue cooking on the other side. And while that continues, we're going to proceed to do a very light garnish. So I'm going to begin by just slicing a few onion rings from some white onion. Proceed to separate your rings one at a time. Just giving you about a handful worth of onion, and you can just reserve the rest. And basically you could just lay those right over your chicken, and that should actually give you a nice visual impact for your guests. And now, just for the last and final stage, we're going to take the rice balls out of the oil. Right, so now those are now beautifully browned on both sides. We're going to proceed to take them out of the oil. Of course, holding it on the side of your pan, allowing for excess oil to drip. And then just move those to some parchment paper, allowing for them to drain the excess oil. And you can turn off your heat at this point. Right, so rice balls done. Now you're very simply just going to grab your parchment paper and proceed to patch around the sides and the top. And once done, just proceed to use a tongue or any lifter of your choice and proceed to add those onto your plate. Just like that. And just for a nice, beautiful finish, I like to actually give a bit of a lemon wedge with the rice balls. It does actually really activate the flavors. And last but not least, you could also just, very simply with your hands, just tear up some coriander leaves and spread those right over one side. And for this particular reason, I did mention we had some mango chutney. It's actually a very good addition to it's actually a very good alternative as a dip. So for that, I'm just going to scoop that with a spoon. Just press a dollop right on the side of your plate there. And just spread that to the side. And to finish that off, always very handy to actually have something to clean the palate, especially if you're serving anything greasy. And a nice, beautiful hand of lettuce should actually do the trick. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is as easy as it is to make your own chicken lollipops from scratch. You've also managed to see how we did our rice balls, and I do hope you've managed to take something from the show that you can actually be able to use in your very own home kitchen. Thank you once again for tuning in, and thank you so much for your support. Do remember that we are looking forward to hearing from you, so you can leave your comments, queries, or any particular questions pertaining the show, and we will definitely be looking forward to getting back to you. So from the studios and from myself, thank you so much. Have a lovely day and enjoy your lunch.